I am Hillary Wilkinson. I'm the podcast, the Healthy Screen Habits podcast, is actually a project of Healthy Screen Habits, which is a nonprofit organization. We're located in Southern California. There are 4 founding members, and we're still going strong. And I'm just listening to you guys, and I'm like holding on because you guys are living the dream right now. So many
Yeah.
of you guys have your grandkids so close to you, and that's so exciting. I'm not there yet. I have a 17 and a 21-year-old. So we're a ways out yet, but early childhood development has always been my jam. I'm an educator by training. And so, but yeah, the whole healthy screen habits gig has kind of, life takes circuitous routes. And now it's one of my main passions in life. And that's how Jennifer Joy and I got connected. And I think that your group is amazing because grandparents hold such a powerful influence upon families. And in fact, we at Healthy Screen Habits think that grandparents have such an integral or hold such an integral part of family life. One of our 5 core habits is the grandma rule. And I'll go over that in a bit. But I'm going to go ahead and start screen sharing then.
Mhm.
So tonight I'm briefly going to cover some of the sort of the generational differences in the digital age and go over some facts about big tech and brain development that you guys actually may already know. But as with anything, sometimes it's good to you may know something, but then it hits different when you're at different stages in life. So it may be something that you're thinking, yeah, I already know that, but there may be some things that you learn. And lastly, I'll go over some strategies that you can use to empower your family with their own healthiest screen habits.
Mhm.
And here we go with the old classic, Dennis the Menace. And first thing right off the bat, always with grandparent groups that I like to address is the generation gap, which is certainly not new to this age of technology. I mean, every 20-year cycle of humanity seems to get its own struggle handed to them. And this makes our current time not unique. But that being said, digital technology has kind of contributed to the human condition in ways not seen before, and it's created a struggle with connection. And it's kind of nice to know where our commonalities and where our differences lay. So we are all digital citizens, but where we are in our comfortability of online life can kind of be tracked by our age or like I just said, generational divides. Digital natives are going to be those millennials and Gen Z populations. And the digital natives have this kind of intuitive navigation ability of technology. They have a fluency to their movements online and understanding of devices. And they have often had smartphone access since childhood or early teen years. They view owning devices and having access to the internet as a right, and they see it as critical to productive life as any other major utility, which makes digital immigrants, the Gen Xers, baby boomers, and older, we often remember the family computer or getting the first desktop. And we're very aware of the cost of these devices that we carry around, as well as we are really baffled by the processing ability of the devices we carry in our pocket having more capability than than all of NASA's computers that put a man on the moon. So we tend to view technology as a privilege and a luxury. And also interesting to note about the 2 different citizen pockets, if you will, is there's kind of like a difference in the way that thought processes and problem solving is handled. And the easiest way to do this is to do sort of a comparison. The digital natives, those Gen Zers and millennials, they like to parallel process and multitask. And they often have multiple screens open at once, like they're watching TV while they're texting, while they're doing something on a laptop. And they report feeling most alive when they're navigating a couple of platforms at the same time. They typically rely heavily on technology, and they will choose it as a source of expertise over prior experiences. For an example, they trust the car's navigation system over a known prior route. Okay, digital immigrants we are more prone to second guess technology. We'll well, the nav system says to take that route, but I know this is the quicker way. And so we also prefer to focus on one thing at a time rather than multitask. In fact, many Gen Zers and older are very skeptical of multitasking, and we often find multiple screen usage to be uncomfortable and kind of distracting. Digital natives tend to make decisions very quickly, even ones that we think of as like real big deal ones, like where to live, what to major in, job transfers. They're big fans of a pivot, and change is really exciting. Digital immigrants prefer to take time to think and consider, weigh options when making decisions. And change is something to be approached like with just a lot of forethought. Then for the last comparison, natives update devices without concern or hesitation. In fact, they typically have their devices update automatically. Digital immigrants often approach device updates with mild dread because your whole desktop gets shifted around, or like the whole operating system. I'm convinced I lose photos every time there's an update. And sometimes we'll put off updating for ridiculous long periods of time. But honestly, we often remember the days of computer crashes happening with updates, like the little cherry bomb icon on our Apple IIes. So the big thing to remember here is that each set of digital citizens brings important things to the table, and we can learn from each other. A lot of what gets focused on is when kids of whom I'm assuming are your kids' age, I'm thinking millennials, there's a whole lot of focus on this. We're the first generation to be navigating these parenting waters. We're the first. But I do a lot of presentations like mothers of preschoolers and stuff like that. And the thing that I really like to point out to them is, yes, you are the first generation to be doing that, but you are the last to remember the before. And all of a sudden it puts them in a place of power where they're like, oh yeah. And so it's like, and recall all of those things, So part of learning from each other with this digital citizenship comes from sharing what we know. And so much of what we hear and read about our kids and technology is really scary and overwhelming. We hear about rates of cyber harms and gaming addictions and trafficking and mental health. It just goes on and on. And a lot of this is all crisis messaging, which is hard. Crisis messaging leads to crisis fatigue, which quickly turns to apathy, which is where it's like, oh, I can't even handle it. Just give them the device. It doesn't matter. So the goal is to avoid this apathy and crisis fatigue by getting empowered through education. I firmly believe education saves lives because it gives us the power and the opportunity to make informed choices. And when we gather awareness and information, it kind of sparks that desire to become educated on a topic, which we can then gain empowerment to make our own choices. So following that tech-savvy pathway, we first need to go over some facts, establish a common language, and then lastly, I'm going to dive into strategies that you can use to help keep grandkids safe at your house and help your whole family establish healthy screen habits. It sounds like a lot of your kids are already on board though, which is awesome. So the first fact is kind of a mental shift, and that's recognizing that the internet is not a thing. The internet is a place. And at Healthy Screen Habits, every season, we hear from very distressed families who have been at the homes of relatives who had no idea about the content that was getting accessed when the kids were together in the basement or in the other room. And so there's when you allow kids unrestricted internet access. I live in, like I said, I live outside of LA. So my reference is an LA reference, but it's the equivalent of dropping them off alone late at night on the corner of Hollywood and Vine, which if you've ever been to Hollywood, you know, that is no place anyone really probably wants to be late at night by themselves. The difference being is that the internet is like that 24 hours a day. So we would never do in real life what we do all the time in the virtual world when we hand kids an unprotected device. So when your child or grandchild is on an iPad, Chromebook, tablet, whatever the device is, it needs at the very minimum to have parent filters in place. And you can easily figure out how to do this by simply Googling the device you have, followed by the words parent controls. And that's the very minimum that should be in place. It's like locking your front door. It won't stop every intruder, but it offers that first layer of protection. So that whole concept of just remember the internet is a place. The next fact to know about is that technology is great. I mean, we at Healthy Screen Habits are not anti-tech. We are pro-intentional use of tech. And one of the wonderful things it has done is allow us to see the inner workings of the brain. And as you probably know by now, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the executive functioning and decision-making part of our brain, is not fully developed until around age 25. So if you can remember raising your teenagers, and they did something, I'm trying to remind myself of this all the time. They do something that you don't understand and you say, why did you do that? And the response is, I don't know. I have to recognize that's a valid response because it's actually the truth sometimes. So this is important in relation to healthy screen habits because kids have not yet developed the parts to determine limits around screen use on your own, which puts the onus on us. So we have to establish time limits, co-regulate big feelings with them, and then ultimately they learn to regulate themselves and moderate their own use of screens. With a lot of, this is older than your crew, but you know, so much of what we look at with healthy screen habits is not actually in the phases of the very little kids. It's parent modeling behavior that needs to be looked at. And sometimes it can just help to make others aware of things like this, that social media runs off an economic model called the attention economy. And when Facebook was first being developed, the objective was, how do we consume as much of your time as possible? And this was the mindset that led to the creation of features like the like button that biohacked users by giving them a little dopamine hit to encourage them to upload more content. And it's essentially a social validation feedback loop that exploits a vulnerability in human psychology. These are not my words. This was said by Sean Parker, who's the founding president of Facebook. They knew what they were doing. So it's up to us to regulate what's happening. And this plus the biohacking of neurotransmitters is what makes TikTok, Snapchat, and all those other platforms so compelling. The programmers were in partnership with neuroscientists and figured out how to create platforms to kickstart kind of this dopamine production and other neurotransmitters to keep people engaged. And this is why we can't put down our devices. So the attention economy, like, what does that mean? Your attention equals more time, which equals more money for the platform. So tech developers figured out early on a really great secret, which was surprise and outrage equals attention. And in the attention economy, this is key, and they're always looking to make money. So I bring this up because during this election time, it's really important to remember. And it might be a good time to mute certain accounts. Not just news feeds, but family members who don't share political views. Your relationship with your kids and your grandchildren will be a lasting legacy. Don't let big tech own it by making you a puppet in their attention economy. To determine the role you and your kids want tech to have in the family setting, you need to talk about it. And talking about tech can be really tricky. And some parents can feel really defensive when they think their parenting style or their choices are being critiqued. And it helps to have a common language. And this list kind of gives you some of the current terms to use. Like the first one, online versus offline life. So now back when, way back when, we used to talk about things being IRL or in real life, but this is one of those generational things. Many young parents today may have had a phone or social media from the age of middle school forward. Most of their social life has played out online, and there's no longer a defining point of real for online versus offline interactions. It's all real. And when we use language that discounts someone's reality by listing things to be real life, it implies that the other stuff is not real, and therefore it kind of drives a wedge in that generation gap. And to kind of convince you how real online life can be, go and check your bank account balance online. And if you see that your online bank account has been zeroed out, it is going to trigger a very real offline reaction in yourself. So just recognize online life, offline life, it's all the same. And when we talk about things, with using those words, it respects the value of all of these transactions. So the next one, if you've read Jennifer Joy's recent Durable Human newsletter, she talked a lot about this phone-based versus play-based childhood. And Jonathan Haidt made really big news this summer with the publication of his book, The Anxious Generation. It's a very good read. And it brought into common culture the concept of this phone-based childhood versus a play-based childhood. And the labels are pretty self-explanatory. The book goes into great detail and provides a lot of really compelling data to support what many grandparents are already shouting, which is kids should be offline and outside as much as possible. And all of that to say, approaching your kids with questions about these topics and using these words will kind of underline your relevance in today's parenting concerns. If you're using like, oh, well, I see we're using play-based childhood, just speak the language of the people that you're trying to talk more with. So when your grandkids are at your house, asking your children for a list of approved apps, shows, and games will save you a lot of heartache. It would be wonderful if all of your time with your grandchildren involved no screens, but that won't always be the case. And you can use the opportunity to talk about shows and what you've learned about young children's brain development when you ask for the approved lists. And because you are asking specifically, it implies a level of respect for their role and their expertise in this digital world. It has been shown time and again that those whom have lasting impact upon us are these people who we feel most connected to. So secure attachment, which is secure connection to a caregiver, turns to be one of the greatest indicators of lifelong things like durability and the capacity to form healthy relationships and many other things. And it's really easy when our kids are, or when your grandkids are 10 months old, because you just get to pick them up and gaze at them and talk to them. But then when they get older, it gets trickier and it gets harder. So the way to connect is everyone likes to be an expert about something. And one of the easiest ways to create connection with adult kids is to really lean into this by asking them non-judgmental, non-transactional questions about their online life. So questions like, do you have any shows you're streaming? Or I'm looking for social media accounts that focus on Mediterranean diet recipes. Do you have any recommendations? You know, really putting them kind of like in the seat of the expert, or where do you find the best travel deals? Or one thing that I've been interested in finding out is how many people are using ChatGPT at work for anything. So it's just kind of interesting to get this feedback. And for grandkids, depending on the age, you can ask about their favorite shows or video games, depending on how old they are, and like in the shows, who's their favorite character, you know? So tech, when we use it as a tool, as a connector, you can think about it as bridging between online and offline interests. And that kind of keeps tech in its lane, which is where we want it to stay. Let's see, next, so now we're moving into strategies as well. And when we talk about strategies for digital protection, it's like many other models, we talk about the use of layers like Swiss cheese. You have one slice of Swiss cheese and you can see right through the holes. But if you take another slice and lay it on top of the holes, then you get a little more coverage. You layer enough slices of cheese and ultimately the holes should be dramatically reduced or even covered. So if we go through the slices of cheese here, making a sandwich, the first slice of cheese would be parental controls. And these should be in place on every device that kids have access to. So you can use YouTube to get tutorials on any device to help you turn on parent controls. And then the next thing also I recommend is turning off autoplay. So for somebody who's having a hard time getting off of the Peppa Pig or getting off of the, you know, Miss Lori or whatever, you can turn off autoplay on all streaming platforms to kind of gain control back. For whole house protection, you may want to install a router, which will filter content coming into your home. I'll explain a little bit more of that in the next slide. And then lastly, if your family can establish some type of digital plan. So the picture shown here is a copy of our free downloadable tool called the Family Tech Plan. It was developed to serve as a conversational springboard for families to decide the role that they wanted tech to play in their lives. It's totally customizable and it's meant to be revisited as the kids grow up. So I'll give a link to that at the end of this presentation. So a lot of people, this is getting back to that router coverage that I was talking about. And a lot of people are just looking to kind of staunch the flow of internet sewage coming into their home. And the best way to do this is through mesh Wi-Fi coverage. So you can install a router in your house that allows you to control the content that flows to devices in your home. And this is what is the best at preventing those accidental encounters with bad / disturbing / pornographic content that we were talking about, where, that happens during the holidays, and it always happens during the holidays. So the thing to note is that routers only cover the devices in your home. Once the device leaves your home, the router will not cover them, which is why if you have a designated, say, iPad or something, and then that your grandchild uses and you think, oh, it's covered, it's really important to still have those parental control filters in place. Because if they take it with them anywhere outside of that router coverage, they will no longer be filtered. So at Healthy Screen Habits, we recommend the Gryphon router, and it's spelled right down there at the bottom. If you go to our website, you can find out more, plus get an affiliate link, which saves you some money. And full disclosure, a small kickback to our nonprofit. So here's a bigger picture plus a QR code of our family tech plan, which is that free downloadable tool on our website. And as many families as there are online right now, there will be as many different solutions to creating your own family healthiest tech plan, because every family has unique needs. I mean, even just as you guys were going around talking about it, we have one family that's dealing with a divorce. We've got another family who's dealing with, a parent who's working away. We've got another. So every family has unique needs and wants around screen and tech. And so this tool is designed to be, like I said, that springboard for the conversation surrounding technology to help your family build their philosophy about the role that you want or that they want tech to play in their life. And it fosters open discussion between all family members and hits on key areas like doing an inventory of the devices in your home, creating tech-free times and spaces, like really protecting dinner time as a tech-free time. And so it's a good place to start. Also on our website are 5 core healthy screen habits. And because I told you earlier about the importance that we place on grandparents, in one of those rules, I want to show it to you. I'm going to see if it'll queue up here. We have 5 videos. There we go. So you can see the videos are real short. We've got 5 core habits, and then you can use those for discussion as well. So Jennifer Joy mentioned earlier the Healthy Screen Habits podcast. Thank you so much. And the vision behind the podcast was kind of a whole library just filled with resources and research and stories about anything that you could need or want to know about screen habits or raising kids in this digital age, advocacy, how it's changing relationships. And that was, like I said, that was the vision behind the podcast. So I'm the host. It's 30 minutes and it drops on Wednesdays. You get a healthy screen habit, which is a tip or takeaway to try out in your home with every episode. And if you're interested in topics like this group might be interested in specific topics, like I did a whole season on tech, tots, and littles, which highlights kind of the kindergarten and under crowd and resources like screen-free summer camps and stuff like that, how to get kids outside in nature. And you can find those episodes by topic on our website. And here are all the places you can find us. But the best place to start is healthyscreenhabits.org.